let me introduce and welcome the current set of panelists from my panel on the new age startups in transforming and democratizing research. I would love to introduce the set of panelists for this particular forum. We have, in fact, there would be few of them who will be joining us. We have here Dr. Soumitra Datta to start with. Dr. Soumitra, thank you, and we welcome you to the panel. We all have been looking forward, and first of all, congratulations for your new role as the Dean for Said Business School, Oxford University.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining the panel all the way from UK. And we also have with us the pleasure of having Dr. Sudhir Kumar, the Director of BITS Pilani Rajasthan campus. And me being an alumna of BITS, I also have I've known him for a couple of years now, and good work he's doing at BITS Pilani. Thank you for being with us today. Mr. Gerald Jaydeep. Gerald is the founder and CEO for Medvarsity. And he's actually redefining the healthcare ecosystem in terms of an online transformation for people to be there online to learn things. And he's creating the largest online e-learning ecosystem for the healthcare. And I think we also have with us some more people maybe joining us. I'm just trying to see who all have joined in.
And sorry,
I think,
yeah, so we also have Apurva joined in, and Mr.
Okay,
Vishnu.
great. I can't see him, so I'm unable to see him. So welcome Apurv to this panel. Apurv actually heads the startup venture capital ecosystem for Google India, and a veteran in the space of startups and startup ecosystem. He's been advisor, investor, angel, and he wears many hats. Thank you, Apurv, for being there. We also have Young Dynamic, one of the startup founders, Vishnu Ramesh, alumni of IIIT Hyderabad, and Subtil, which is .ai, which is one of the interesting startups he has created. And in the area of discovery of documents, he's doing fantastic work. We also have with us Shubham Goyal joining from Singapore. Shubham is actually the founder of Cerebri, a startup that incubated from the NUS campus, and today Cerebri is actually doing a great work in terms of automating the workloads in the edtech space, and he's doing some fine work across many continents. Thank you all for being there. We will start with Dr. Soumitra to start. You have seen the technology landscape change. We have gone through COVID. Technology has become a main force of driver across various ecosystems. Can you help us understand how AI and ML have contributed to this change in the ecosystem, especially from an edtech perspective?
Yeah, thank you very much, Venkatesh, and it's indeed an honor and a pleasure to be joining this distinguished panel. COVID certainly has been a tipping point in many ways for many sectors, and certainly education is one sector which has been impacted by COVID in a dramatic way. Now, one way to look at least conceptualize how COVID is changing things is to think about the different ways in which technology transforms and impacts society. The first order of impact of any technology disruption really is substitution. So let's say you invent the car, you substitute horse carriages by car. You invent the mobile phone, you substitute the fixed line of the mobile phone. The second stage of impact is diffusion. When the new technology spreads, just because it is cheaper, easier, higher quality, better, it just spreads across society. You saw, for example, once the car was invented, in 6 years, the number of horses decreased dramatically of transportation. The same thing of fixed lines. Today, people don't really use fixed lines any longer much more. The third order of impact is the most interesting and important one, which is transformation. When fundamentally, you can start creating new ways of living and working just because everyone has the new technology much more easily accessible. So in the case of the cars, the whole idea of shopping malls and suburbs came about because people had cars. You could separate out where people lived and worked, separate out people lived and shopped, and so on. Now, if you look at, for example, education, what has happened really is we have gone through in a very rapid way the first two phases, so substitution, diffusion. It was mandated by the government, by COVID, by pandemic, and so on, to go up those two first phases because no choice. Now the big question ahead of us really is what happens next. Do we in fact push and go into transformation? Or do we in fact reverse and go back to what life was like pre-COVID? And that's where I think the key decision point right now in education is. And as an educator myself, I see that very clearly in universities, is that there's a tremendous inertia to in fact go backwards. What I say, back to the future, in which people are saying and arguing that no, face-to-face education is the only way, is the best way, best for learning, and that's the right thing. And let's go back. And that is very easy to do because that's what we have done for many years, many decades. And that also justifies the huge investments we have been making in buildings and infrastructure, which really is our business model that we have actually lived up to. Now, trying to move to a new model of transformation of more digital, more hybrid, more other kinds of new innovations would require courage, would require changes, and would require a very different mindset in terms of innovation. And not many universities and business education programs are actually ready for this. So to answer your question, really what I think right now is that we are at a very critical moment when education and research in general has to decide whether or not it has the courage to move forward and transform, or it just wants to go in the safe zone of being, back to the future where it was 2 years ago.
I think I fairly agree with your point, and I also see that a lot of startups which have raised funding, a few years or maybe 18 months back or 12 months back, are finding it struggling right now to raise their next round. A couple of them are cutting down their expenses, and few of them who actually, move literally fast to get into medversities and kind of universities have found, really working model not working, and in fact they're in the process of shutdowns. Maybe I think it will take some time from a consolidation phase as we move from the pre-COVID to the COVID and now again back to the normal ecosystem. I think some of them will rediscover the model. Some of them who moved really fast have to figure out a way that really helps them to settle down from a business point of view. I think it's a little bit time to also decide, and also the change of audience requirements. Students, their parents, and what they require, what they feel about an online education versus an offline. But somewhere I'm a firm believer, and hybrid model will certainly exist, a combination of online and offline, wherein certain workloads can be automated and certain can really be, can certainly require the impact of an offline mode of teaching. So I think it's also depends on country to country. So there are different factors that define. So moving further to an landscape of the healthcare ecosystem and the online education, Gerald, recently we signed an agreement, an MOU partnership with Springer Nature, wherein Medversity, which is one of the largest online e-healthcare platform for healthcare professionals, can you just give us some significance of this, and also how are you seeing this healthcare learning business emerging in India, especially from a research point of view?
Sure. Thanks, Venkatesh, for inviting me to the session, and definitely a privilege to interact with others on this panel. I'm going to take off from a little bit what you were just sharing, Venkatesh, and also what Dr. Datta was talking about from an EdTech reach and impact perspective, and give a background on why, for example, we partnered with Springer Nature and what we are trying to do in healthcare education, especially the online space. If you look at the evolution of education, it's essentially a derivative of a classroom format that existed for thousands of years. All EdTech did was take it online, put some fancy graphics and animations to it, but it still continued to be the expert teaching the viewer, with very rarely the viewer playing any role in actively learning. It was an immersion experience, right? But if you look at the healthcare industry, medicine is taught from a problem-based learning approach. So patient is the center of the problem, and you understand the patient, and then you understand the disease, and then you treat and manage the disease. It's not that you learn the definition of diseases and you go out looking for an exact replica of that disease online or in a patient. So the reason, for example, Medversity's success, not only during COVID and post-COVID and now, has largely been because we've taken a patient-centric approach to education, and we've tried to question the way education happens completely. If you're using online as a methodology, why only digitize the electronic lectures that anyway happen in a classroom format? Can you truly turn it over on a head and leverage the online platform to give a different experience so that it supplements or complements what the student goes through or what a professional goes through in the real world. Therefore, our core architecture around case-based collaborative learning. And if we are going to stay in focus on case-based approach to medicine, we need supporting partners like Springer Nature to give, technical, definitive information, access to articles, access to journals, access to publications that can help supplement the learner's journey through education. Our role as an education entity is essentially to be a coach. We create an environment where this immense access to content that the learner can use. It's structured, it's curated, but we don't force them to go through lesson 1, lesson 2 and learn this definition, repeat this definition, 1957 war of Panipat or whatever. It's more about how do you make a change to the patient's life because you have a critical skill. And I think our own partnership between Springer Nature and varsity plays a very, very crucial role. Second thing is, linking it back to research, just as a cross reference, for an average cardiac surgeon in the US does about 1,000 cardiac surgeries a year. In India, an average cardiac surgeon does about 10,000 surgeries in a year. Right. So if you clinically look at the volume of exposure that a cardiac surgeon has, the assumption would be he or she in India would be better skilled, better talented, more enabled. The only gap that the Indian clinical leadership has is that we don't believe in research and publication. A lot of it is resigned to academics in India and through international clinical organizations. So therefore, thought leadership rests in the Western world where execution happens in India. And we are hoping as Midvarsity, through our partnerships that we're doing with organizations like your own, we can also change the tone to build the culture of research, of publication into every professional's life. Why only in medicine? Why not in engineering? Why not in management? I mean, how many, sure, management gurus write books once they get close to retirement, but why not a fresh entrepreneur, a failed entrepreneur? The other gentlemen on this call who are starting their own companies. I think the opportunity to focus on research is definitely very high, and I'm hoping through this and more conversations we can drive some of that mindset shift.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot that can be done in the healthcare space, given the volumes of the work what our doctors do. I think the kind of data they have and data sets they have, I think a lot of things can be done, especially in the healthcare space. And there are, unlike the Western world, I think we need to build in that ecosystem very strongly in the healthcare startup ecosystem to strengthen that. And of course, partnerships like what you have with Apollo or Springer Nature and many others will redefine that space. Moving to Dr. Sudhir Kumar, from BITS Pilani campus joining us today. The thing I want to understand is what is the secret sauce behind BITS Pilani able to pump in many unicorns out of the 90 plus unicorns we have. I think BITS alumni are doing extremely well. What is the cultural, is that academic curriculum defining that, or what is giving that boost to so many startups coming from BITS? Is there any secret sauce? And we have a lot of audience from many institutions across the world who have joined us. Would love to hear that.
Thank you, Venkatesh. And it is indeed a great pleasure to be attending this panel discussion with all the elite people who are, I think, the expert in their subject domain. Coming to your question, it's a very interesting because I'm possibly going to reveal the $1 trillion answer to the public out. No, I'm just kidding. It's an open secret in the sense that, let me just give you a little overview about the BITS. Pilani has been, like people say, it's an oasis in the middle of desert, and it's an institution which gives a fantastic platform because of their very unique academic curriculum program, which has been designed where the students have a lot of flexibility in terms of picking up the courses, in picking up the various non-academic activities by various other ventures they can get into. We have a zero attendance policy. That is a very unique facility which we have. The students are not forced to get into the classes anytime. If they are interested, they can get into that. We have this practice school concept where the students are given absolutely industry immersion exposure during their stay in the institute. Beyond that, also the infrastructure for innovations, the tinkering labs, which provides them the opportunity to do what they want to do and explore the different parts of it. It's also driven by the entrepreneurial, like students, senior students, and the mentors, and also the faculty member who actually encourages many students to get into the innovations and incubations domain. Beyond that, the BITS Pilani enjoys a very strong alumni network who provides the mentors and the angels in a vast alumni network, which is something which is, again, a very supportive directions for the students to venture out. And slowly the things are changing in a sense that most of the academic institutions where students look for the job as the outcome of the program, here instead of job seeker, we are kind of creating a job creators, and they actually get into that. And of course, I'm very happy to say that at the BITS Pilani, we have the Center for Innovations, Incubations, and Entrepreneurship, which is we call CIIE, which has three major constituents, and one of them is called the Center for Entrepreneurships and Leadership. We have a technology business incubator, and also we have an IPR cell. And particularly in TBI, what we call is the PITE, which is called Pilani Innovations and Entrepreneurship Development Society, which actually allows the students to get incubated, to open their companies over here, and get exposure, get mentorship, get support financially, and in all the ways. Beyond that, we also have a very interesting program with work integrated learning program, where more than around 35,000 students are not student, we can say working professionals. They are associated with the institute and they are registered, and I'm sure Venkatesh is one of them. I'm sure he's getting benefited from there. So this is something which is the program where not only the professionals are getting benefits from there, but also they bring in a lot of new interesting problems for the faculty members, and subsequently that get transferred to the students and get converted into a problem or an idea which can come up with the startup. So there are some of the things. I'll just share some interesting numbers which possibly will give you an idea that we have almost like 10 Indian unicorns and maybe 2 US unicorns which have been produced by the BITSians. We have more than 100 startups which are been like incubated or under incubations at BITS Pilani. And we are number 3 in India in terms of creating the startup companies beyond the IIT Bombay and IIT Delhi. And this is something which is again remarkable achievement by the BITS Pilani. More than 7,500 are the co-founders and the startup founders. And this is something which is again amazing. And the interesting part, I think what Dr. Datta was highlighting, the pandemic has created some kind of a very the kind of impact. During this time, actually, the 17 alumni startups have generated more than $730 million in last 15 months. And this is something which is just has happened because of the kind of ecosystem which has been created. And I'll just close it with one statement that to support that, to make it a bidirectional, the students who have graduated from this institute, the alumni who has gone out, they have invested hugely for setting up the Pilani Innovation and Incubation Center, what we are calling is the BITS Pilani Innovation and Incubation Center, BPINC we call, where the AI, the machine learning, the blockchains, the IoTs, in name it any area, for that they have invested a huge amount of donations to create that ecosystem or to strengthen the ecosystem. So this is something which is remarkable thing. So it's like a full cycle coming back, like the people started, they're coming back and investing into this ecosystem. So this is the open secret of BITS Pilani of producing the largest number of startup companies.
I think that's really remarkable to see. And in fact, whether it's Pixel in the space research or Gray Orange in the robotic space or a Postman in the SaaS model or a Swiggy, which we daily use, they all are products of BITS Pilani and their alumni, students, and really, really good that the kind of work you're doing is really impacting India. Moving on the same note to Apur. Apur has been an active investor in the Indian community. He's an angel. Now he leads the startup ecosystem at Google, has a very good idea of what's happening in the Indian ecosystem. Apur, because you look at many startups at an individual level on a day-to-day basis, can you name a few interesting startups who are doing some interesting technology interventions that can empower research?
So that's a great question, Venkat.
No.
So firstly, research is a very, very wide topic. So I won't even try to do the Sagar Manthan and draw out all the jewels that are there. But let me focus on a huge opportunity. So if you think about India, India has almost 4 stratas. So we have the top 38 million which think, act, and work in English. That's called India. Then we have 70 million which we call Bharatvan, which thinks in their predominant regional language. And together they contribute to about 110 million internet users. After that, we have what is called Bharat 2, which does not think in a mass regional language, but which thinks, works, and acts in a dialect, which is a subsect of a language. That's a huge opportunity. And when you think about research, if the whole purpose of research is to take humankind to frontiers which are not even imagined and make the world a better place, a great opportunity is to really, really scale internet use cases for index audience in India. And there are some startups which are really using AI to do a brilliant job. And I'll offer you some examples. Um, so there is a company called Agrix. Agrix is a Google Launchpad incubating company, which has developed a first of its kind mobile-based AI product called Procure that leverages machine learning for real-time quality inspection of agri-produce. Um, Now, the problem with most farmers is they are not the ones which can utilize uh, English UI, uh, and often they get disintermediated. So the value which they get for their produce is not as much as they would have got if they were really commercially savvy. They thought in English, they worked in English. So that's a very interesting use case. Um, the second is a startup called Pratilipi. So Pratilipi is a Bangalore-based startup which actually is working in more than 18, 19 languages and aspires to be the Disney of India. So it is allowing content creators in very, very small towns to use their mobile phones to shoot stories, to record podcasts. Um, it uses cloud technology to actually edit it remotely in a distributed fashion. And then it allows creators from even small villages in India to monetize to a global audience. There are 3 genres which are getting built out of India in podcasting, which are a big rage globally. They are horror, thrillers, and romance. So imagine a content creator sitting in a small village in India, monetizing for the American audience and being able to get revenue from LA, New York. So these are not pure research use cases, but these are commercial research use cases where you're being able to actually uh, drop the information asymmetry, the digital divide, and actually connect creators to content consumers. Many such examples exist. There is another very interesting company. It's called Ajna. So it was founded in May 2020, and this has built SaaS products that deliver a vision-based video analytics solution. Very, very important use case. The solutions currently provided by the startup include crowd safety intelligence. So recently we saw a lot of angst against the Agniveer scheme. It can really be used by security forces to scan faces at large, match it against a database. So computer aided vision, right? And then uh, pull out miscreants and antisocial elements. Automated queue management systems, retail video analytics. So phenomenal use cases. In COVID, it was used for mask detection, social distancing, people counting, safety reporting, crowd density analysis, epidemiological risk prediction. Fascinating use cases. So I think AI is a space where, as the world becomes uh, from an AI-driven world to an AI-first world, research and startups have a huge, huge role to play in driving innovation.
It's really nice, Apurv. It's always exciting to talk to you because you have a good update of what's happening in the startup ecosystem on a day-to-day basis. You scan a lot of startups. I think, as in fact Rajan used to say, the ex-MD of Google, and now he's the Sequoia Worldwide MD. So, he says that very interesting stuff. The existing set of unicorns are built for the 100 million people. So India is the land of in 1.39 or 1.4 billion population. I think we need to build more startups focused around agriculture, focused around sectors, financial literacy. There are many aspects which can really touch the real Bharat, which differentiates from the 100 million so-called the Indian ecosystem of unicorns. So I think there's a lot of work, and of course, some of the names you mentioned are doing exciting work. So moving on to two young founders, Shubham joining us from NUS Singapore. He's done some exciting work with Cerebri. So, I think my question to you is, since Cerebri was born out of an PhD work, could you describe the process of getting the IP from the university? How did you set up a private company? Because there are a lot of university founders, directors, deans, students who joined us from many countries today. So it would be good to know, how did you actually end up building a company from a university?
Hi Venkatesh, hi everyone. Very nice to meet you all. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I can only share my experience. So I am an alumni of National University of Singapore. Actually, this whole idea was born out of my co-founder's PhD project. So I had started my PhD at Singapore MIT Research Alliance. Basically, it's easier to get into MIT through this way. And then I wrote to my professors who asked, like, I wanted to publish more papers related to the area. So half the time we spent in Singapore, half the time at Boston. So my professor connected me to Rahul Singhal, who is my co-founder now. So he was working on auto-generating content. So rather than using question banks or static templates, why don't we try to build a virtual tutor that is actually adaptive, like actually can help the student. I won't bore you with the details, but then that's how I even knew that this was possible. Then the second problem was, once Rahul finished his PhD, how do we actually take this as a private company without giving IP to the university? Because in university would have been a sort of, no offense intended, but a dead shareholder, because they wouldn't be active. So luckily, NUS was nice enough. NUS Enterprise said that, okay, if you only take non-tangible assets, then university won't claim any IP. If you claim tangible assets, then university will claim IP, but you will have the option to buy us out at 1% once you reach $10 million in revenue. So that was super helpful, because once we reach that scale, we wouldn't have a problem with doing that. Then another way that another concern was, if we were going to apply for patents, then a lot of our research work was published. Rahul had done a lot in his thesis. So NUS signed an agreement with us not to publish the thesis for another 7 to 10 years. And yeah, it has been 7 years, but we keep on extending it. And at NUS, not only the alumni community, but the professors became our first angel investors. So that was helpful, because, and Singapore government has a very nice scheme where they match $2.5 for every dollar that you get from initial angel investors. So that's how we got the idea started. NUS Enterprise funded the patent application and legal costs, so that was also super helpful for a young startup. Later on, we basically, and everything was as convertible notes. So we always had an option to return the initial capital from the university at a certain rate of interest, which was great. Later on, our first employees were actually, okay, I should not call them employees because we didn't really pay them, but you have our professors had a lot of final year project students and PhD students working on logic systems and machine learning. So they were hungry for projects and publications, and so we were quickly able to sign MOUs that state that none of the source code, etc., would go out, but you are free to publish the results. So actually, a lot of our efficacy studies were done by students, but at no cost to us. So yeah, that's how Cerebri was born.
I think Cerebri is also building one of the world's most advanced edtech startup, wherein they are automating the entire workloads using virtual assistants. That means there is no human intervention; they can automate everything. And in the current turbulent times, they are able to raise they are actually in the process of doing a great round. And I think Shubham was busy with that, and he could take out time to join us. Really appreciate Shubham, and thanks for giving us. I think that's a very interesting insight in terms of how other universities in India or outside India should look at supporting research organizations and supporting startups, not only in terms of giving them space and incubation, but also helping them with access to funds and other infrastructure which is required. Moving on to the other co-founder, who is actually from Indian ecosystem, Vishnu. Vishnu has been a very interesting founder. Again, he built his startup along with his professor from IIIT Hyderabad, and he's actually doing some exciting work in terms of document automation and discovery platforms. Vishnu, can you give us a little bit brief about what you're doing, and also the technologies what you believe can accelerate research?
Sure, Venkatesh. So, of course, hi everyone. Glad to be here. In terms of what we do itself, Subtle.ai is democratizing access to internal resources, let's say, of unstructured data. So this would also include documents, right? That, of course, we know that the research fraternity deals with a lot of documents to do things like, let's say, literature surveys, which would basically be scoping out all the current research work that is done. In these scenarios, the time itself and the effort that it takes to kind of get exercises like this done is quite extensive. So Subtle.ai is essentially able to come in to solve these kind of problems. What we are essentially able to do is leverage AI bots that can understand any question that you ask and then instantly locate the best answers for you. So in some of our market cases, we realized that our customers were able to locate information 5x faster, and they were also able to find it with a 10x improvement in terms of the amount of effort itself they put into it. So that's a little bit about us. We work with a couple of banks, couple of legal research platforms, but as far as research is concerned, we can significantly accelerate the pace itself of the research work that happens just through simple access, right? These are AI bots that can understand all your research papers for you. If you were to, let's say, download them and maintain them privately, or there are also ways to embed our technology on top of platforms like Springer, where you can essentially help really accelerate the pace at which new papers are discovered just through simple questions that you can ask. So, right, in terms of how we personally can help the research fraternity, it will be through the pace of research itself, being able to kind of reduce the load and then also increase the pace.
That's really nice to know, Vishnu. I think, publishing industry overall, is changing, and technology is actually making that change happen. The new age Gen Z population, their consumption patterns are different. They look at bite-sized learning. Content creators are very, very different. Consumption patterns are different. The way they, look at consumption through devices is different. It's surprising to know that of a population of 7.4 or 7.3 billion on the planet, we have more than 50 billion connected devices as per Gartner. That doesn't mean everybody has a device, but people have multiple devices. So how these systems or the devices talk to each other, the amount of data we are capturing, and how do we actually look at the Gen Z population and the data requirements, how they consume data. I think that, a lot of research and publishing industry will go through technology changes, and organizations like you can really be handy to us in terms of making that change happen. Moving to Dr. Soumitra, now we have a lot of students from India, universities, students who are actually live streaming the session across STEM to non-STEM institutions. So, you've been a person of high regards from the Indian fraternity who led a lot of universities and their growth patterns from Cornell to now to Oxford as a dean. Can you share some experiences or ways in which startups and researchers should work together, to solve the new age problems?
So I think clearly, we are living in a golden age of, I would say, for Indian students and Indian researchers, because Indians are doing extremely well right now, and especially at least in North America and certain countries in Europe, they're doing extremely well. So the brand image of Indian students and researchers is very, very high. So that's one thing. The point I would make to Indian students and researchers is, you have very high aspirations from others around you. So people expect a lot. Okay, that's very important, because sometimes we forget that. When you live in India, we'd often forget that. When you live in an environment where everyone else thinks you're a genius, and they're expecting you to do genius level stuff, it doesn't always happen. But the fact of the matter is that people have high expectations. So what is important is that if you understand that, then you will raise your own aspirations. Okay, you will seek to perform at a higher level, which is very important. You don't have the motivation to perform at the highest possible level, I think it will not happen easily. Second, I think what is very important is to take some risks. If I look at my own career as an academic, and I now in my 50s, and I look at what would I have changed if I could go back 30 years, I would certainly say that I should have taken more risks in my career. I chose a much more standard path of being a professor, of taking on academics, much more secure path, a little bit like a quasi government role. And today I would say, for young people, I would say you should take some more risks. And the same is true for research too. Research also, you can take some more risks in the kind of research topics you choose and the kind of research you focus on. And so I think the two things which are very important as my quote unquote possible suggestions would be, to dream big. And dreaming big is made easier because people have high expectations from Indians today. Second is to take more risks and really, in some sense, be resilient, in the face of failures, because the fact of the matter is that not everything that we'll do will succeed. Failures is part of life. And I think in India, we're not necessarily taught culturally how to deal with failure as well. Your parents push you to keep succeeding. And if you don't do well 1 year, then your parents come and hit you very hard on the head, So I think the fact of the matter is that failure is part of the process of learning and growing. So if we can actually have this combination of dreaming big, taking risks, and being resilient, I think that's a very good combination that will serve Indian researchers and students, very well in the future.
That's really nice, and I think a lot of students appreciate your feedback. I also believe that India should celebrate more of failure. In institutions we only celebrate success. So right from schools and colleges, if we start celebrating even failure, because failure teaches you many things, and that's actually necessary. And of course, I believe every successful person would have learned a lot from his own personal or professional failures. So I think as a culture, we need to celebrate more failure and make it as a part of a normal process. And I somehow believe love and fear can never coexist. If you have love, you don't have fear. And if you have fear, you don't have love. And we need to make a choice there. So, carrying on the same message to Dr., from Dr. Soumitra to Dr. Sudhir Kumar, your, 2 cents to share with young academicians, researchers, or startup founders who are audience today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Venkatesh. I think Professor Datta has already highlighted 2 very key things, but what are the important things which is important for the startup point of view is that what I find is this generation is kind of a risk taker. I think what Professor Datta said, we have taken that path, which was a very desired path or decided path, but now new generation takes a lot of challenges, and they would be ready to take the risk, which I find it at the present institute. But at the same time, they are extremely fragile as well. So they need to be very careful in that is sometimes the failure, what you mentioned, very categorically, that is something which is there. But the life is all about the beautiful journey. I think they should kind of take the risk. They should be very open to the ideas, and the dream should be so big that it should even scare you. And that is what exactly is the dream about. That you should dream something which gives you the sleepless nights, so that you can and go for the best idea, and chase that with full conviction. So that's very important. That would be my suggestion to all the startup companies.
Lovely to hear that. Apur, from your perspective, from Gen Z population, millennials working towards startups, any 2 cents you have for those young startup founders who are starting off early in their stages? Any feedback, because you scan through startups on a day-to-day basis?
Sure.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Great. So I would say 2 things. Don't look at what the West is doing and just build for India. Copy that and build for India. So the days of looking at Crunchbase, PitchBook, seeing what is getting funded, and just copying that and building for India doesn't work anymore. Lots of new models which are India first and which are actually going global, getting done in India. And I'll give you an example. So a very interesting startup is a company called Stage. It's a OTT for Haryanvi. And it allows people, so in Indian culture, when somebody is performing well, usually an elder or multiple elders get up and they shower the performer with money. real money. They've done that in OTT. So imagine you're watching a OTT and an actor says some good lines or a poem which you like. You can take out your virtual wallet, put real money in it, and then shower it. So as founders, I think it's a deep responsibility to understand India, understand aspirations of India, problems which Indians face, opportunities in India, and build Bharat out and not global in. So very, very important. Um, all the spaces are still wide. I was talking to a VC and he said that, in edtech, we already have 8 unicorns out of India. A ninth one will not be born. And 2 days after he said that, Physics Wala was born as a unicorn, which started as a YouTube channel teaching physics and in 6 years became a unicorn. So I think we haven't hit the final frontier in any industry. We still have a long room to go, millions of problems to solve, which is exhilarating. So think Bharat and solve for Bharat.
Thank you, Apur. I think the Physics Wala is a great example. In fact, I met the founders and GSV, which invested in them. And the first round is a maiden round of 100 million, taking them to $1 billion valuation. It really changed the dynamics of the tech ecosystem. And I think it's actually built up from the grassroots of connecting with people and teaching physics, and went very, unnoticed like the other startups which do a lot of advertisements and also a lot of branding. But they really
massive organic traffic on YouTube. For 4 years, it was just
Absolutely.
a YouTube channel. Brilliant work.
Absolutely. Yeah, it makes sense. I think building something for real Bharat makes a lot of sense. Shubham, your 2 cents for startup founders, you can relate with a lot of them because they are youngsters and you've been talking to a couple of them, I believe. So, what are your feedback or message or mantra for the youngsters who are looking at building ecosystems here from a startup perspective to impact the larger Indian or even the worldwide ecosystem?
Thanks, Venkatesh. I don't get a lot of time to interact with other startup founders, trying to get my own startup running first. Actually, staying on the topic of research, like one resource that we have found very useful is like using the researchers at the university. So there are some problems that we solve, like we can do autonomous question generation, we can generate adaptive paths around it. But however, there are some problems that are not yet solved completely. For example, taking an input of a doubt image and not just mapping it to existing images, but converting it to formal logic so that we can then like represent it in our framework. So like I reached out to university professors, some of them had students who were working on similar problems, asked them if they would be willing to try this problem out. And usually these resources are cheaper than if you hire like if you had an experienced ML engineer, etc. And the advantages that because like if you know your alma mater's community of professors working on this area, you can sort of ideate with them and then hire cheaper interns or like work. So by cheaper interns, okay, maybe the using of the word cheaper is not right, but that's a reality. Like interns are cheaper than full-time employees. You can give them back. You can give them to the PhD students so that they can implement. And then like we use a lot of NUS's help to do this sort of cheaper experimentation. But otherwise, like no specific
I think
advice.
your point is very fair in terms of leveraging the researchers in the universities. I think that's a very key thing for a lot of startups in the India as well as outside ecosystem. How do you actively work with researchers and faculty members, who can come handy, who can guide you, who are domain experts? Moving quickly because in interest of time, the last opinion from Vishnu Ramesh, your opinion or your feedback to the young guys who are in the academic and the startup ecosystems. And of course, there are many countries who logged in. Any interesting feedback you have, Vishnu, for them?
Yes, Venkatesh. So there are 2 points. I think one would be something more from my personal experience, which is being a young founder of a deep tech startup. What I would say is probably 2 things in these kind of scenarios. Number one, partnerships with professors at from academia ends up being very useful, because they can help you as a sounding board as you start working on solutions for problems that you're trying to solve. They also bring in good experience, and if you get the right names, you would also get good hires from a research standpoint, because people would want to work with professors that are well experienced, that have made good contributions to the research fraternity. In terms of the execution itself, I truly believe the research execution should still happen in-house within the startup, because these are like the seas. The markets are like seas. It's a very changing environment. You need to adapt quickly. And to kind of be able to do that effectively, I believe the research execution itself should be happening in-house. From a broader perspective, I would say enjoy the process of being product market fit seeking. Which means you should enjoy the process of trying to solve a particular problem, which of course involves finding the right problem first. And I truly believe as you continue to enjoy that, everything naturally falls in place from that point onwards.
Excellent. Thank you, Vishnu. And I would like to thank all the panelists for the valuable time. Dr. Soumit Sudatta joining us from UK, Gerald joining us from Hyderabad, from Medvarsity, Mr. Shubham Goel from Singapore, Vishnu from Hyderabad, Dr. Sudhir Kumar, the BITS Plani Rajasthan campus, and Apur from Google from Delhi. Really appreciate all your valuable time and your insights, and hope we have any more questions from the audience. We would love to forward that. In interest of time, we can't take it right now. We're already surpassed the given time. Thank you so much for your valuable time once again, and hope you have a great day. Thank you so much.